I never thought a camping trip would turn into one of the most awkward and unexpectedly eye-opening weekends of my life. Like, seriously, I'd gone out there expecting fresh air, some bad coffee, and maybe a few close calls with bugs. Instead, I ended up sharing a tent with this guy that first barely knew, and then he did something that totally threw me off. He just took off his boxers. Right there. No warning, no build-up, just casually dropping his shorts and standing there like it was the most normal thing in the world. Okay, let me back up a little so this doesn't sound completely insane out of context. I'm Alex, 28, mostly city guy, not huge on the outdoors but willing to suffer a little for the sake of a weekend away from my usual routine. My friend Josh invited me on this group camping trip with some coworkers from his new job. I didn't know most of them, but I figured, why not? Meet new people, get some fresh air, maybe prove I'm not a total disaster in nature. So I show up Friday afternoon, lugging my backpack and feeling way out of place among the hiking boots and fancy camping gear. Everyone else seemed way more prepared, like these trips were a regular thing for them. That's when I met Ryan. He's Josh's coworker, about my age, with this easy smile and a laugh that just kind of fills the space around him. There's this quiet confidence to him, not in an obnoxious way, but like he's comfortable in his own skin. I liked that right away. The group planned to split into smaller tents that night, and since I was the odd one out, Josh told me I'd be sharing with Ryan. I didn't really mind, better than trying to set up my own tent in the dark and potentially messing it up or getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. We grabbed a spot near the lake, close enough to hear water lapping at the shore, but just far enough from the rest of the campfire chatter. We set up the tent together, which was kind of a mess because I'm not exactly a pro at this stuff. Ryan just laughed it off, showing me how to fold the tent poles and secure the stakes. The whole time, he kept throwing casual jokes my way, making me forget how awkward I felt. Once the tent was up, we settled in with our sleeping bags and a couple of beers we snagged on the way. The sun was dipping low, casting this warm orange glow through the trees, and for a minute, everything felt really calm. Like, even though we didn't know each other well, it was just easy sitting there. Then, as we got ready to turn in for the night, Ryan just dropped his pants and slipped off his boxers like it was nothing. I swear, my brain short-circuited for a second. I wasn't sure if I should pretend I didn't notice, or if I should say something, but he just gave me this grin and said, "It's way too hot in here." I laughed nervously, feeling heat rush to my face, and tried not to make it weird. But honestly, that moment changed everything. It was like suddenly the space between us shifted, and I realized I wasn't just sharing a tent with some random guy anymore. Something else was happening, and I had no idea where it was going. That's where things really started to get interesting. I shifted in my sleeping bag, trying to act like the fact that Ryan was now just in his boxers, or, well, no boxers at all, wasn't throwing me off balance. I mean, we'd been talking and joking all afternoon, but this was different, more intimate in a way, which made me realize how little I actually knew about him beyond the surface. So I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're just gonna walk around like that all night?" Ryan smirked, propping himself up on an elbow. "What? You don't approve? It's a tent, man. No one else can see us, and it's freaking hot. Plus, I hate feeling restricted when I sleep." I chuckled, but honestly, I was a little jealous of his confidence. I barely met the guy, and here he was, totally at ease in this cramped, dark space with me. Me, on the other hand, was suddenly hyper-aware of every little noise I made, trying not to seem like I was staring or getting weirded out. The weird part was, I wasn't uncomfortable because of him. It was more like I was curious, like there was this magnetic pull I didn't expect. "Fair," I said finally. "I guess I'm just not used to camping etiquette like that." Ryan laughed, and it felt like the tent got warmer, even though the sun had fully set and the night was settling in. We talked a bit more, the kind of easy conversation that flows when you're stuck somewhere with nothing else to do but get to know someone. He told me about his job, marketing stuff, which I pretended to understand, and how he'd grown up outside the city, which explained the camping skills I lacked. I told him I was more of a city kid, prone to sweating through my clothes and panicking over bugs. He teased me about it, but in a nice way, and I found myself opening up more than I expected. At some point, the conversation slowed, and the only sounds were the occasional rustle of the leaves outside and our breathing. That's when I noticed how close we'd gotten in the tent. Our shoulders were almost touching, and I could see the soft lines of his face in the moonlight filtering through the tent's fabric. Without thinking, I reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair back from his forehead. He didn't pull away. Instead, he caught my hand in his and gave it a gentle squeeze. "Alex," he said softly, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. I don't know if it was the quiet of the night, the fact that we were miles away from anyone else, or just the way he looked at me, but something inside me unlocked. The awkwardness from earlier faded, replaced by this strange but electric connection. "Yeah?" I whispered. He smiled, that same easy, warm smile from earlier, but with something more, something vulnerable. "I'm really glad you came on this trip." I swallowed and felt my heart thump a little faster. "Me too." There was silence again, but this time it was comfortable. I could feel him shifting closer, and before I knew it, our faces were only inches apart. I could see the faintest hint of stubble on his jaw, smell the fresh, pine-scented soap he'd used that day. And then, without even thinking, I leaned in. Our lips met softly, hesitantly at first, like testing the waters, but then the kiss deepened. It wasn't one of those crazy, whirlwind moments you see in movies. It was real and tentative, like discovering something new but knowing it could be exactly what you needed. When we finally pulled back, Ryan rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "I've been wanting to do that all day." I laughed quietly, breathless, and said, "Me too." We settled back into our bags, but the air between us had changed. The tent didn't feel cramped anymore. It felt like the start of something. Hours later, I still couldn't sleep, but I wasn't mad about it. Instead, I just stared at the dark shapes around us and thought about how sometimes the best moments come from the most unexpected places. Who knew that sharing a tent and a ridiculous camping trip could lead to this? And honestly, I couldn't wait to see what else the weekend had in store. Morning came slow and weirdly quiet. I woke up to the faint light sneaking through the tent fabric, and for a second, I forgot where I was. Then I felt Ryan's arm lightly draped over my side, like he'd moved closer in his sleep. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I should be freaked out or just roll with it, but I chose the latter because, well, I didn't want to ruin whatever this was between us. So I just stayed still, pretending I was a rock or something. Eventually, Ryan stirred and opened his eyes, giving me this sleepy smile that made my heart do a weird flip. "Morning," he whispered. "Morning," I replied, trying not to sound as awkward as I felt. We actually ended up talking more that morning, though it was all quiet stuff. The kind of small talk you have when you're figuring out how to navigate something new without scaring the other person off. We joked about how terrible the coffee was that the group brewed by the fire, and Ryan teased me about my almost complete lack of camping skills. At some point, Josh wandered over, looking for us, and I realized how close we were still tucked in the tent, which made me suddenly self-conscious. Ryan gave me a quick, reassuring squeeze of the hand before sitting up and giving Josh a casual hello. I swear, I felt like a teenager again, the nerves bouncing around in my chest. That day, the group set out for a hike up a nearby trail, and Ryan and I ended up walking together. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little distracted by how easy it was to talk with him, how his laughter made the trees around us seem less intimidating, and how the occasional brush of his hand against mine felt electric. I kept catching myself stealing glances and wondering if he felt the same little sparks I did. We stopped at a clearing overlooking the valley below, the sun hitting his face just right so that his eyes seemed to glow. I blurted out something stupid about how crazy it was that I never thought I'd meet someone like him here, of all places. He just smiled, that same easy smile, and said, "Sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them." Later, back at camp, things got strangely quieter between us, but not in a bad way. It was like we both knew something had shifted, but weren't sure how to talk about it yet. I found myself watching him as he poked the fire, the flickering light casting shadows across his face. Then he caught me staring and just laughed. "Caught you," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Hey, what can I say? You're distracting." I admitted. Ryan's grin softened. "Same here." That night, the air was cooler, and we both pulled our sleeping bags closer together. I couldn't stop wondering if he felt the same nervous excitement I did as I imagined what might come next. There were no sudden moves or grand gestures, just the quiet companionship of two people sitting close, sharing space, and maybe something a little more. Before we fell asleep, I reached for his hand. This time, he didn't hesitate. He intertwined his fingers with mine, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. We lay there for a while, just holding on to that small connection, the sounds of the forest lulling us into a calm I hadn't realized I was craving. The last day of the trip was bittersweet. Everyone was packing up, joking about how they couldn't wait to hit showers and real beds. Ryan and I exchanged those glances again, the ones that said, without words, that this wasn't just a weekend thing for us, that there was maybe a story worth exploring here. As we folded the tent, Josh came over and clapped us both on the back, teasing, "You two better not start something and leave me out." Ryan just laughed and gave me a look that sent a familiar buzz through my chest. "No promises," he said. Driving back to the city, I kept stealing looks at Ryan in the passenger seat, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. I had no idea where this was headed, but for the first time in a long time, I was really looking forward to finding out. Back in the city, everything felt different. The familiar noise, the constant buzz of traffic, the crowded sidewalks, they all seemed a little less oppressive after those few days out in the woods. But more than that, I felt different, like I'd come back with this secret, this spark that was hard to ignore. Ryan and I didn't have an official plan for after the trip. I guess neither of us wanted to rush things. But at the same time, there was this unspoken understanding that something had started between us, and we both wanted to see where it could go. So we decided to keep it casual, start with grabbing coffee or meeting up downtown. Our first real hangout after the trip was at this tiny little coffee shop Ryan swore by. I showed up nervous, like it was the first date of my life, which I guess it kinda was. He was already there, casually leaning against the counter with that same easy smile that had drawn me in on the first day. "Hey," he said, eyes lighting up when he saw me. "Hey," I replied, trying not to sound like I was about to trip over my own words. We grabbed our drinks and found a corner to sit, and the conversation started right where we left off at the campfire. We talked about everything. Work, music, some dumb stuff from college, and honestly, I couldn't remember the last time I felt so relaxed around someone. At one point, Ryan reached across the table, lightly brushing my hand. I didn't pull away. Instead, I grinned and laced my fingers with his. This simple connection sent this warm feeling through me, the kind you don't get just from words. Over the next couple of weeks, we kept meeting up, sometimes for coffee, sometimes just to walk around the park or grab dinner. Each time, I found myself wanting to learn more about him, like peeling back layers that were both familiar and new. He was open about his past, his dreams, and even his doubts, which made me feel safe enough to open up too. One night, a few weeks after the trip, we were at his apartment, watching some old movie that neither of us was really paying attention to. The city lights spilled through the window, giving the room this soft glow. I was sitting close to him on the couch, and without thinking, I leaned my head on his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around me, pulling me a little closer, and whispered, "I'm really glad we met, Alex." I looked up at him, heart racing, and said, "Me too." Then, as if something clicked between us, he shifted so that we were face to face. His fingers traced my jaw, and I felt this sudden urge to close the distance. Our lips met in a kiss that was slow and sure, full of the promise of something real. After that night, things started to feel more serious, but not in a pressured way. It was more like we were both dipping our toes into something we'd both been missing. There were still awkward moments, like when I accidentally called him by a nickname he didn't like, or when Ryan teased me for being terrible at cooking. But those little things just made everything feel more human. One weekend, he invited me to meet his family. I was nervous, not because I thought they'd judge me, but because it felt like a big step. When I showed up at their house, his mom greeted me with a warm hug, and his little sister immediately wanted to know if I liked dogs. The whole afternoon was filled with laughter, bad jokes, and way too much food. Driving back to his place afterward, Ryan reached over and took my hand. "You did good," he said softly. I smiled, feeling like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But even with all the good stuff, I couldn't shake the fear that something might go wrong. Like maybe I was reading too much into it, or maybe Ryan wasn't feeling the same depth of connection. Sometimes I'd catch him looking thoughtful, and I wondered what he was thinking about. One evening, a few weeks before the trip's 1-month anniversary, we were lying in bed, and I finally found the courage to ask, "Hey, can I be honest with you about something?" He turned to me, eyes curious. "I'm kind of scared," I admitted. Like, scared that us, might not last, or that I'm getting too attached too fast. Ryan smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. "Alex, I'm scared too, but maybe that's okay. Maybe it means this matters." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my chest. That night, we talked for hours about fears, hopes, and what we wanted from this. It didn't solve everything, but it made me feel like we were in it together, even when things got messy or uncertain. Looking back, I never would have guessed that a spontaneous camping trip and a pair of missing boxers would lead me to someone who's become such a big part of my life. It's funny how the smallest moments sometimes change everything. And honestly, I'm excited to see where this story goes next. After that night, things between Ryan and me started settling into this comfortable rhythm that I hadn't really experienced before. It wasn't like we were ignoring the fact that life could throw curveballs. Hell, we both had jobs and messy pasts, but there was this steady current underneath everything, pulling us closer without rushing. One Friday evening, Ryan invited me over to his place for dinner. He'd been talking about this homemade pasta recipe he wanted to try, and I was curious to see if his cooking skills were as good as his camping skills. Spoiler alert, Ryan can make pasta like a pro. We worked side by side in his tiny kitchen, laughing over my clumsy attempts at chopping garlic and his sarcastic commentary on my unique technique. The kind of jokes that felt like a secret code only we understood. When we finally sat down to eat, the food was amazing. But honestly, the best part was just being there together, sharing something so simple. After dinner, we moved to the couch, the TV on but forgotten. Ryan pulled me close, and I rested my head on his shoulder again. This time, the feeling was different, more settled, more certain. I could feel his heartbeat steady beneath my ear, and I realized I was starting to think in terms of we instead of me. That night, as we lay tangled in blankets, I thought about how much had changed since that camping trip. How a few days in the woods, sharing a cramped tent, and a pretty awkward moment with his boxers had somehow opened the door to all this. But life, of course, never lets you get too comfortable for too long. A few days later, I got a text from Ryan that caught me off guard. "Can we talk?" Like, serious talk. My heart skipped. Not in a good way. We met at a quiet cafe after work. Ryan looked a little tense, fiddling with his cup, avoiding eye contact at first. I tried to keep my cool, but inside, I was bracing for something I didn't want to hear. "Okay," he started, taking a deep breath. "So there's something I haven't told you yet. Something I probably should have said earlier." My stomach flipped. "What is it?" He looked up, meeting my eyes finally. "I'm planning to move, like across the country, for work. It's a big opportunity, something I've been chasing for a while." For a split second, the world tilted. I wanted to say it didn't matter, that we could make it work, but the truth was, I had no idea how. The distance, the time zones, the inevitable strain, it all felt overwhelming. "How long do you have?" I asked quietly. "Couple of months." I wanted to tell you sooner, but I was figuring out how to say it without messing everything up. I swallowed hard, trying to process it all. "Why didn't you say anything before?" "We've been, building something." He reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "I know, and I didn't want to hurt you or make this weird. I just wasn't sure how to handle it myself." We sat in silence for a while, the noise of the cafe fading into the background. I felt a mix of sadness and anger and confusion swirling inside me. But beneath it all was this stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way. "Look," I said finally, "I want to try. I don't know how it's going to work, but I want to try with you." Ryan's eyes softened, relief washing over his face. Me too. Over the next few weeks, everything felt charged with this bittersweet energy. We made plans for visits, late-night video calls, and even joked about writing letters like it was the 90s. But underneath the smiles, there was this quiet tension, the kind that comes from knowing things are about to change. The last weekend before Ryan left, we decided to go back to that same camping spot. It felt right to revisit where it all began, to hold on to those memories before everything shifted. Setting up the tent was easier this time. We moved with practiced ease, stealing glances and sharing tentative smiles. That night, lying side by side under the stars, I felt every emotion at once: love, fear, hope, and an aching sadness. Ryan turned to me, brushing his fingers over my cheek. "No matter what happens, I'm grateful for this, for us." I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "Me too." We spent the night talking about everything and nothing, holding each other close as the forest around us whispered secrets we weren't ready to hear. Leaving the next morning was brutal. Packing up the tent felt like folding up a part of our story, but I knew it wasn't the end. It was just another chapter. As we drove away from the campsite, the sun rising behind us, I looked over at Ryan and realized that love isn't always about perfect timing or easy answers. Sometimes it's messy, complicated, and a little terrifying, but it's also worth it, and I wasn't ready to let go just yet. The drive back to the city after that last camping trip was quieter than usual. Neither of us had much to say, but the silence was heavy. Not uncomfortable, but charged, like we were both trying to cram a million thoughts into too little space. I kept stealing glances at Ryan, trying to memorize the way the sunlight caught the lines around his eyes, the way he wrinkled his nose when he was deep in thought. When we pulled into his driveway, he finally broke the silence. "I guess this is it for a while." "Yeah," I said, voice low. "I'm gonna miss you." He looked over, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I'm gonna miss you too." More than I thought I would. There was a pause, that awkward moment when you want to hold on but know you can't. Then Ryan leaned in and kissed me, a slow, deliberate kiss that felt like a promise and a goodbye all at once. We pulled apart and he said, "We'll figure this out, okay? Call me every day. FaceTime. Whatever it takes." I nodded, though part of me wondered if whatever it takes was going to be enough. The next morning, Ryan left. I didn't go to the airport with him. Something about wanting to keep our last moments private, but standing alone in my apartment afterward, the silence was deafening. The space where he used to be felt like a hollow echo. The first few days were the hardest. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from him, which I cherished, but I hated that the screen was the only place I could see his smile or hear his laugh. We joked about how terrible video calls were for catching subtle expressions, but it was better than nothing. One night, about a week into the distance, I was scrolling through old photos on my phone and stumbled across that awkward snapshot Josh had taken during the camping trip, the one where Ryan had this goofy grin mid-shorts drop moment. I found myself smiling, my thumb hovering over the screen before I sent it to him with a text, "Miss you." His reply came almost instantly, "Miss you more." Counting down the days. That was the start of a new rhythm. Every night, no matter how exhausted either of us was, we'd carve out time to talk. Sometimes it was deep conversations about what we wanted from life. Sometimes it was just stupid jokes and sharing songs we thought the other might like. But as weeks turned into months, the distance started to wear on us. There were moments when the silence on the other end of the call was longer than I liked, or when plans had to be changed last minute because of work. I caught myself wondering if Ryan was starting to pull away, if the spark we had was fading with the miles between us. One weekend, after a particularly tough week, I found myself scrolling aimlessly through my phone when a message popped up. It was from Ryan, but it wasn't his usual playful self. It read, "Can we talk? I've been feeling off lately." My stomach dropped. I didn't want to imagine what that meant. We set up a video call, and when he appeared on my screen, his eyes looked tired, worried. "I don't know," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I guess the distance is harder than I thought. I'm trying, but sometimes it feels like I'm falling behind, not just with work, but with us." I bit my lip, feeling my own frustration bubbling up. I've been feeling that too. Like we're drifting without even realizing it. He nodded. I don't want to lose what we have, Alex, but I'm scared we're just stretched too thin. The conversation was raw and honest, probably the hardest we'd had yet. We didn't have any neat solutions, just promises to keep trying and to be more open about when things got tough. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, the glow of the screen fading, but the weight of his words lingering. That week, I made a decision. I booked a flight to visit him. No matter how hard the distance was, I needed to see him, to remind both of us why this was worth fighting for. The day I landed, Ryan was waiting for me at the airport, looking nervous but relieved. We hugged like we might never let go, and in that moment, all the miles and doubts felt smaller. Over the next few days, we explored the city together, walking hand in hand through crowded streets, sitting in tiny cafes, talking about everything and nothing until our voices got hoarse. It was like we were rediscovering each other, rebuilding what the distance had strained. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Ryan turned to me and said, "I've been thinking, maybe it's time I stopped running from this. From us." I looked at him, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" He smiled, that same easy smile that had drawn me in months ago, and said, "I'm starting to look for jobs closer to home. I want to be with you, Alex." For real, I felt something swell in my chest, a mix of relief, hope, and something I can only call happiness. We didn't have all the answers yet, but that night, as we fell asleep tangled together in his bed, it felt like we were finally moving in the right direction. Sometimes love isn't about grand declarations or perfect timing. Sometimes it's about showing up, sticking it out, and choosing each other again and again, even when it's hard. And honestly, I'm ready for whatever comes next. A few months after that visit, Ryan found a job back in the city. It wasn't the big opportunity he'd originally chased, but it was something that would let us be in the same place again. When he told me, I could tell he'd wrestled with the decision, but there was a sense of relief in his voice, like a weight had lifted. We didn't make a big deal out of it, no grand gestures or dramatic announcements, just a quiet understanding that this was the next step. Life still had its usual chaos, work stress, and Sunday nights spent debating what to order for dinner, but there was also this steady comfort in knowing we were building something real. One evening, not long after, we found ourselves back at the park, near where we first started hanging out after the camping trip. The city lights flickered around us, and the air smelled like early fall, crisp and promising. Ryan pulled my hand into his without asking, and I squeezed back. "I'm glad you came with me on that trip," he said softly. "I never expected it to turn into all this." "Me neither," I smiled. "I guess sometimes the best things happen when you're least ready for them." He laughed, that same easy laugh that had pulled me in from the start. "Yeah, and maybe when you least expect someone to take off their boxers in front of you." I shook my head, laughing with him. It was absurd, but it was ours, the kind of memory that felt like a secret handshake between us. As we sat there, watching the world go by, I realized something. Love isn't always fireworks or perfect moments. Sometimes it's the quiet mornings, the honest conversations, the small choices to stay despite the uncertainty. It's messy and imperfect, but real. And with Ryan, it felt like home. Not because everything was easy, but because we were doing it together. I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. For once, I wasn't worried about what the future might hold. I just wanted this moment, this us, to last. Sometimes that's all you need.